the smell reaches you before the cart does. It is somewhere between rot and ammonia, between something dead and something alive and fermenting. You press yourself against the wall of your building. The horse moves slowly. The driver does not look at you. The wooden barrel on the back of the cart is sealed, mostly, but the seal is not perfect, and in the gap between the lid and the rim, something dark catches the faint light from your candle. You are standing in London. The year is 1281. It is 4 in the morning. The cart turns the corner and disappears into the dark. What you just watched is not a merchant delivering goods. What you just watched is a man transporting the collected contents of your neighborhood's cesspits, the accumulated waste of 300 people over the last several months, to a buyer waiting outside the city walls, who will pay him in coin for the privilege of receiving it. That man driving the cart owns 3 houses. You do not own one. Tonight, we are going inside the trade that built quiet fortunes in medieval Europe, the trade in human waste, the men who collected it, the routes they used to move it, the farmers who competed to buy it, and the strange, suppressed history of an industry that fed entire cities without anyone wanting to admit how. Stay with me. It starts underground. You are underground. The cesspit beneath your building is approximately 6 feet deep, 4 feet wide, and lined with stone. It has been filling since the building above it was constructed, and it has not been emptied in over a year. The smell at the bottom, where you are standing right now, thigh deep in its contents, working by the light of a single tallow candle, is not something language handles well. It is the concentrated waste of an entire household. It is months of decomposition. It is methane and sulfur and something else underneath both of those things that you cannot name. You are a gong farmer. That is the actual term, recorded in city guild documents. Gong, from the Old English gang, meaning to go. The place where you go. The place you are standing in now. Your working hours are fixed by law. In London, by a municipal ordinance documented in the City of London letter books, gong farmers were prohibited from working during the day, not for their benefit, but because the smell of active cesspit clearing was considered too offensive for citizens to encounter during waking hours. So you work in the dark. You work at night, while the city sleeps above you. You are not alone. The work requires a team, typically 2 to 4 men. One man descends into the pit. He fills wooden buckets. The others haul the buckets up by rope and transfer the contents into the sealed barrels on the waiting cart. A single cesspit takes an entire night to empty. Sometimes 2 nights. The rate of pay reflects the nature of the work. Historical records document gong farmers charging 2 shillings per ton of waste removed, at a time when an unskilled laborer earned approximately 2 pence per day, and a carpenter earned around 4 to 5 pence. Across a single productive night, clearing a large cesspit, a gong farmer could out-earn a craftsman's entire week. The city paid. You got paid. But the money had a condition attached, a condition that goes beyond the smell, beyond the hours, beyond the darkness. There is a documented risk specific to this job that has nothing to do with the filth itself. In 1326, a man named Richard the Raker, one of London's refuse collectors, whose work overlapped closely with the gong farmers, sat down at a privy in the city. The boards beneath him were rotten. They gave way. He fell into the cesspit below and drowned. His death is recorded in the coroner's rolls of the City of London. The record describes what happened to him as drowning monstrously in his own excrement. Everyone who heard the story continued to do the job anyway, because the money was that good. And we have not yet discussed what happened to those sealed barrels once the cart left your street. Stay with me. You are the cart driver now. The barrels behind you are sealed and loaded. The horse knows the route. It has walked it enough times that it does not need direction until the gate. You are moving through streets that are technically clean right now, because the whole point of this operation is that it happens before anyone with authority is awake to see it. Medieval cities were not passive about waste management. This is the false picture historians sometimes let stand, that medieval people simply lived in their own filth without system or awareness. The reality, documented in municipal records across England and France, is that cities had regulations, enforcement mechanisms, fines, and designated routes, precisely because civic authorities understood the connection between waste accumulation and urban disease, even if they described that connection in terms of miasma rather than microbiology. London's assize of nuisance, active from the 13th century onward, and extensively documented by historian Barbara Hannawalt, records dozens of cases where citizens were fined for allowing cesspits to overflow into shared walls, into neighboring properties, into the street. In 1347, a case brought before the city authorities documented that a cesspit in the parish of St. Bride's had been overflowing for 2 years into the cellar of the adjacent property, a situation the records describe with remarkable civic understatement as a great nuisance. So you, driving this cart, are not operating outside the system. You are the system. Your route out of the city is fixed. You are not permitted to travel through the main market streets.
We shall see.
You use designated roads, secondary roads, roads that run close to the city walls, roads that keep the cargo away from the food stalls, the bakeries, the wells. When you reach the city gate, the gate is opened for you. This has been arranged. The gatekeeper has been paid a small fee to open before dawn and close behind you without logging the transaction in any detail that would embarrass the city. Outside the walls, the road opens up. And here is the thing about what happens next that most people do not expect. You are not going to a waste dump. There is no waste dump. What is in those barrels behind you is not refuse. It is not garbage. It has a buyer. It has a price. It has, in fact, several buyers who have been competing for it. And the farmer you are delivering to this morning secured his supply by outbidding 2 other farms last autumn. The product in those barrels has a name. In England, it was called nightsoil. In France, la matière fécale. In the agricultural literature of the period, it was referred to as a soil amendment, a substance that, when applied to fields, increased crop yields in ways that farmers could observe and measure, even without understanding the nitrogen cycle. You are not driving garbage out of London. You are driving next year's harvest. And the man who owns the contract for this route, not you, the driver, but the man who owns the business, has been accumulating that contract for 15 years. He has rivals. He has employees. He has a reputation in the trade that is both professional and precise. We have not yet talked about how much that contract was worth and what a man could build from owning it. Stay with me. You are a farmer now. You are standing at the edge of your field in the gray light before sunrise, and the cart from the city is late. This is not a small irritation. You paid for this delivery. You negotiated the price in autumn. You paid a deposit. And you have been waiting since before dawn because the window for application is narrow. The soil needs to absorb the material before the morning sun hits, and the smell drives your laborers off the field. The other farms within 5 miles of your position are also waiting for their own deliveries from their own contracts, and there are not enough carts to go around. The demand for nightsoil as a fertilizer in medieval England and France was not marginal. It was structural. The agricultural system of the period depended on soil fertility in ways that modern fertilizer has erased from collective memory, and the 2 primary fertility inputs available to a medieval farmer were animal manure, which was expensive, required animals to produce, and was never available in sufficient quantity, and human waste, which a city of 30,000 people produced in quantities that were, to put it clinically, reliable. The city of Paris in the early 14th century had a population estimated by scholars at approximately 200,000 people, the largest city in Western Europe at the time. The first reliable count, a register of hearths taken in 1328, recorded 61,098 households within the city parishes. At the standard rate of waste production, that population generated a volume of material each day that could not be left inside the walls. The farms surrounding Paris in the Seine Valley and the flat agricultural land to the north were among the most productive in France. Scholars, including medievalist Georges Duby, in his work on the rural economy of medieval France, noted the consistently high yields of farmland adjacent to major French cities, without always connecting that productivity directly to the waste trade that fed it. That connection was not accidental. It was contractual. Nightsoil contracts between city-based waste collectors and rural farmers were documented commercial agreements. In England, records from the manorial court rolls of the 14th century, analyzed by historian Richard Britnell in his work on English market towns, reference payments made to gong carters and ordure dealers as standard line items in farm accounts. This was not informal. It was budgeted. The pricing was tiered by content. Waste from wealthier households, households consuming more meat, more grain, more varied diet, was considered higher quality than waste from poorer districts. There are no surviving price lists that explicitly categorize human waste by neighborhood of origin, but the differential pricing of animal manure by diet and species in the same period strongly implies the same logic was applied to its human equivalent. A farmer near London paid more for material sourced from the merchant quarters than for material sourced from the tannery districts. The logic was agricultural, not social, though the social implication was not lost on anyone involved. And we have not yet talked about the men at the top of this system. The men who did not go underground, did not drive carts, did not negotiate with farmers themselves. The men who simply owned the contracts and collected the margins. Stay with me. You are back in London now. You are not underground. You are not driving a cart. You are sitting in a room, in a house, on a street near Cheapside, and a man is bringing you the accounts from last week's collections. You own 4 contracts, 2 in the ward of Farringdon, 1 in Cripplegate, 1 near the river in Dowgate. Each contract covers a cluster of cesspits attached to private households and commercial properties. Each contract is renewed annually. Each renewal, you charge slightly more than the year before because the city is growing, the cesspits are filling faster, and your competitors have fewer horses than you do. This is not a hypothetical figure. The historical record contains men who built precisely this kind of operation. The city of London's letter books and guild records from the 13th and 14th centuries document a class of contractors who held collection rights over specific city wards. Men who paid the city a fixed annual fee in exchange for the right to collect waste from a defined territory, and then sell what they recovered. What they earned from the farmers who bought that waste was their profit margin. And in a period of expanding agriculture and growing urban population, that margin was consistent. In Paris, the system was more formalized still. By the mid-14th century, the waste collection districts within the city walls were effectively divided among a small number of contractors who had acquired collection rights through purchase or inheritance. Sharon Farmer, in her work on labor and the poor in medieval Paris, documents how the city's most essential and least glamorous services were controlled by men who had understood before their competitors that steady, unglamorous necessity was more valuable than variable prestige. The man who held a long-term contract for cesspit removal across 3 city parishes was paid every time a cesspit needed emptying, which, in a city of 200,000 people, was constant, regardless of war, weather, or which family sat on the French throne. The math was simple. A city cannot stop producing waste. A farm cannot stop needing fertility. The man who stands between those two facts and owns the infrastructure connecting them is the man who gets paid whether the harvest is good or bad, whether the plague comes or does not, whether the king changes or stays the same. The gong farmer at the bottom of the cesspit was earning 2 shillings per ton removed. Good wages, dangerous work, paid by the load. The man who employed him owned the barrel, leased the horse, and held the collection contract, was earning 2 shillings per ton, multiplied by every cesspit in 4 parishes, every night of the year, with the gong farmer taking the risk and the contractor taking the percentage. He owned 3 houses. You, standing against the wall at 4 a.m, watching the cart disappear into the dark, owned none. The cart is gone now. The street is quiet. The smell will fade by the time the market opens. By the time your neighbors emerge into the morning, there will be no trace of what passed through here. The city will smell like bread and horse and river water and smoke. The night's work will be invisible. That is the design. History has a preference for the visible, for the king, for the battle, for the thing that was written down because someone wanted it remembered. The gong farmer was not written down because anyone wanted to remember him. He was written down because cities needed records of where the waste went, and into whose hands the coin passed, and who was responsible if the cesspit overflowed into the wrong cellar. He survives in the margins of documents about other things, but he was here. Every city that grew in medieval Europe grew because its waste fed the farms that fed its people. The chain ran from the cesspit to the field, to the grain market, to the bakery, to the table. And the men who owned the first link in that chain built quiet, unheroic, unromantic fortunes from the thing that everyone produced and nobody claimed. There is something true about human nature in that. Not something flattering, something true. The things we refuse to look at directly are often the things everything else depends on. Stories buried in the past,